This is Bad Boys and Beyond with your hosts, Mike Payton and Keith Black Trudeau.
That's it, baby, and a foul.
Hey, y'all put it in the front page, back page, middle page, wherever, headliners, column 1 or 2. We will win game 2. Good back it off. We will win game 2.
The game's over, and the Pistons have won the World Championship.
Welcome back to Bad Boys and Beyond. We are your hosts, Mike Payton and Keith Black Trudeau. We're back again. And Keith, I'm curious, did something kind of big happen today, maybe a few hours ago? Do you remember at all?
Yeah, apparently Tom Gores cut a $65 million check to get rid of his head coach.
Yes. I don't know if that is the most ever to pay a coach to not coach here, but that has to be very high. Obviously, if you've been hiding under a rock and you just now decided to come out from underneath that rock just to watch Bad Boys and Beyond, Monty Williams was relieved from his duties as the Pistons head coach about 2-3 hours ago, and now the Pistons are back into the coaching search after a year of being in the coaching search. So. And especially a year in which they decided to offer Monty Williams one of the most lucrative contracts in American sports coaching history. So your thoughts, Keith, right off the bat.
Yeah, historically, everyone is going to remember this hire, not just because of the fact that Tom Gores ate 80% of it just to get rid of him, but the fact that it set a new bar for coaching salaries, which a year ago, I argued at the time, and I'm happy to say I was right, that this would elevate every other coach in the league. People were complaining that they offered Monty Williams all this money, and my response was, how come Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr and Tyronn Lue aren't making more? Like, that's the question you should be asking. So if nothing else, I think this was historically good for coaches because I think they, as we saw in this offseason, a lot of successful coaches got fired simply because the organization needed a scapegoat. And when NBA teams need a scapegoat, it's never management and it's never players. It's always the middle guy, and that's always the head coach. Now, to be clear, Monty Williams not a scapegoat. He took over the Pistons and just immediately crashed the car into a ditch. 14-68. There's not much else you can say about that. It is the worst winning percentage of any non-interim long-term head coach in franchise history. And guess what? It's the worst record in franchise history. So I don't see that changing in our lifetimes. Monty Williams will always be the answer to that trivia question from here on out. In terms of Pistons head coaches that lasted a year and got let go, he's on a very short list there as well. Ron Rothstein, former Chuck Daly assistant, left them to coach the expansion Heat, and that was actually Detroit's pick to succeed Chuck Daly once Chuck Daly quit the Pistons, and he lasted a year. Just was not cut out for the head coaching profession, and they fired him after a mediocre 500 season in which Dennis Rodman drove everyone crazy. The other infamous one-year wonder was Michael Curry. A name that many Piston fans, both as a player and a head coach, Curry he's just not a guy that people in Detroit remember fondly for any reason. And I think that's kind of sad because I think he's a great story as a basketball player, but as a head coach, it was just a disaster. And of all things, they gave him a roster with Allen Iverson on it, an aging Allen Iverson, trying to get along with Rip Hamilton and Tayshaun Prince and Rasheed Wallace and a declining Pistons. It was just a recipe for disaster, and it absolutely was. So how does Monty fit in the pantheon of Pistons history? Highest paid head coach they've ever had, which is great, but he came here and he just at no point looked motivated or engaged. I kept wanting to give him chances, but it was just obvious as the season wore on that he just was emotionally checked out, if he wasn't mentally checked out. And look, my evaluation of a coach isn't about how often he screams to a referee, but it's like he didn't even try. Like there were so many instances where, any other coach would have stood up for his team, stood up for his players, or at least, done a replay challenge. And I swear Monty Williams did none of that. He very rarely went to replay. He very rarely got a technical for arguing with a referee. And I'm not saying that's a great strategy, but you got to do it sometimes just to make a point, right? And he just never did that. And it just felt like he was so turned off by the roster that he had that he was just resigned to, look, this is a bad team. It's going to be bad no matter what I do. So I'm just going to come in, punch the clock, collect my check, and punch out at the end of the night. And you can't look, your primary job as an NBA head coach is to motivate your players, inspire your players to follow you, because if you don't, this is the type of season that happens. And I will say, I know I'm kind of dragging on. I'm not letting you talk, but I'm going to leave this with one thing. I have no inside knowledge of, how many of the Pistons young core actually liked Monty Williams or not. They certainly said a lot of positive things about him when they hired him. But I will say this, if any important Pistons players, particularly Kate Cunningham, if any of them wanted him to stay, he would not have been fired today. So at the very least, they did not stick up for him.
Well, yeah, he definitely that kind of goes on with the point that I'm going to make here is that Woj also managed to point out that Williams was blindsided today when this firing went down.
Stop.
He apparently had been working with Trajan Langdon on plans for next season already. I mean, I don't know how much work he could have gotten done in just a couple weeks. So I don't think he should have been blindsided. He probably should have saw it coming. But, the interesting thing is, you mentioned that he didn't show a whole lot of motivation, and it didn't, he never wanted to be here. He didn't want this. Like, that's what we always remember. Like,
yeah,
he did not want to come and coach a team. Like, if he wasn't offered this unbelievable contract, he would have just stayed at home. But yet he was offered an unbelievable contract, one that you just could not turn down. So then he did decide to come coach, and he just looked like, someone who was just defeated all year long. And you said that he was going to be collecting or he would just show up to collect a check. Well, he's going to be collecting a check now. He's not going to have to show up anywhere. He's going to be able to sit at home and get paid from 2 different NBA teams. So in that regard, as our friend Doc Joe Brown, who was on the show last week, called him Money Monty. In that regard, I mean, this man's a legend for what he's getting paid to do nothing. So he doesn't have to coach for a while.
And look, you can't, even if he didn't want the job, I don't want to use this as an excuse. Like, yeah, they offered you more money than you could turn, but you know what? You still took it. So you have no excuse to come in and not put your best foot forward, not give the Pistons the best version of yourself, which I would argue he never did the entire season. So, yes, blame Tom Gores for stepping in, and I think this was kind of his way of showing a little contrition, which is, everybody's coaching candidate I hated last year. I didn't trust any of the people under me, so I went and hired my own guy, and that was a massive disaster. I'm going to take responsibility and cut this ridiculous check, which I know everyone in the league is going to make fun of me for the rest of my ownership tenure, as if I haven't given them enough reasons, right? But I will at least credit Gores for admitting his mistake and not dragging this out, and not, definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. I think bringing Monty back, it would have been, look, we all would have understood the reason why, but it still would have been a very dark cloud hanging over the team next season, because we all would have expected, as soon as things go bad, he's going to get fired anyway, because no one is excited to have him here anymore.
Well, it was kind of drug out though a little bit in a sense. The season ended in April. Obviously, the team had to wait until they hired a new president of basketball operations, but Langdon's been here for just a couple weeks now. Monty's gone. The draft is next week. I don't know. To me, that seems like, and maybe I'm overplaying it a little bit, but I would be a little concerned if I were a head coach and I'm coming in after the draft and I didn't have any part of, helping you select whoever this new player is going to be. Does it fit my view? Does it fit, I don't know. I guess maybe it's too much thought on my process. Maybe I'm going galaxy brain on that, but that's just the theory I'm going with.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Look, some part of me thinks that maybe because the NBA frowns on other franchises trying to get into the news cycle during the finals, that maybe this was kind of they knew they were heading this way, but they were kind of waiting till the finals ended before they actually made this enormous decision. But look, the coach's job is to coach, and you can do this before. Look, I think they'll have a head coach before the draft. And I think maybe whatever head coach, it's going to be one of Trajan's guys, right? Trajan is not going to hire Arn's guy. He's not going to hire Tom's guy. And Tom is going to sign off on anybody that Trajan wants within reason. I don't think that there's going to be any major disagreements. I don't think Tom is going to put up a fight this time. I think he's going to get out of the way and hire whoever Trajan tells him to hire. And I think that's just going to be it. And whoever Trajan hires, it's obviously going to be someone that they're already in sync with. That somebody that he probably already knows pretty well, and he's probably going to draft accordingly in accordance with that. Now, just one more thing, like the Pistons never announced that Monty Williams was coming back. They could have easily done that in a Friday news dump. They just a little one, Monty Williams is being retained, given a second chance, whatever. A simple one sentence tweet would have done it, and they never did that. So don't tell me that Monty Williams was blindsided. They never publicly said that they were going to keep him. A guy that has $60 million left in his contract, and they would even commit to having him being the coach to start next season. So if that didn't raise alarm bells in his head, I don't know what he was thinking. So I don't know. The blindsided thing is fluff to me.
Well, here's I'm going galaxy brain again here, Keith,
Okay.
And maybe I'm reaching on this one. I'm shooting from the logo and I'm on the other side of the half court line here, shooting from the logo.
Stanley Pritchard.
What if the head coach is already on staff and his name's Fred Vincent?
Whoops. I'm sorry?
What if the head coach is already on the staff and his name is Fred Vincent?
The shooting coach?
Who just got hired last week. I mean, he's been an assistant for years now.
But he's a shooting coach.
What if he's the head coach?
No, because if that was the case, they would have fired him before. Like, you don't hire the next head coach before you fire that. Like, they're going to hire him as an assistant and then promote him the next. No,
they hired Joe Dumars as the assistant GM and then gave him the GM job the next year.
That was the next year, and that was everybody knew that was going to happen, including the guy he replaced. Like that wasn't like we look. We're going to bring this Joe Dumars guy in, Mr. Rick's son. He's going to be your assistant for the next 5 years. No, Rick's son knew exactly what Dumars was coming in there to do. He's coming in there to learn for a year and then take his job after a year, and Rick's son would step aside. This would be just an entirely ridiculous scenario where you hire your next head coach, who, by the way, is a shooting coach and I don't think has ever even been a lead assistant, and you're gonna fire Monty Williams 3 days later and then promote him from assistant to head coach. Like, look, I'll give you a ton of credit if that actually happens, but I will, in the same breath, rip the Detroit Pistons for a good solid 45 minutes. And I do not doubt me on this, Mike. I will do that.
The whole Pistons team is a ridiculous scenario. I mean, what are we talking about? This is like the most ridiculous team in the entire world. Would you put anything past them?
I would. Just like when people told me that, they're keeping Monty. They're just gonna not say anything and pretend that nobody's expecting him to get fired. Like, it's just such a ridiculous situation. Like, look, Vincent comes extremely highly regarded around the NBA. There's only a few shooting coaches who I actually know the name of, and he's one of them. But you don't want your head coach being a shooting coach. Like, he has his lane, he has his niche, and if he becomes a head coach someday, fine. But right now, he's not on the track for that. I could see him maybe being a lead assistant. I don't know. But the shooting coaches are kind of separate from everybody else. They're kind of like defensive coach. They're on the staff, but when you fire the head coach, you don't necessarily fire them too.
All right. Well, Vincent's out on the coaching search. So, off the top of your head, two candidates that could be in the forefront of the search.
I mean, James Borrego and JJ Redick are the two. Because JJ Redick has ties to everybody in the Pistons organization now. He has ties to Arn and he has ties to Trajan. Also ties to Trajan. I don't know if he's one of Trajan's guys, but they were in New Orleans together. And then there's James Borrego, who is also in New Orleans. He's definitely one of Trajan's guys. Now, Borrego seems like he's a strong candidate to get the Cleveland Cavaliers job. JJ looks like he's earmarked for the LA Lakers. And I honestly don't know if either of those guys – look, Trajan has probably a few candidates in mind. He's probably had a few candidates in mind since he took the job weeks ago. So I don't think he's just now scribbling down a list, and he probably sees that those guys have interviewed for other jobs that are certainly more attractive than the Pistons. So he probably has someone else in mind. Micah Nori – he has Pistons ties, not necessarily ties to those guys, but he was an assistant with the Pistons for years under Dwayne Casey, who I guess is still here, so he has ties. But he really came out of his shell as a lead assistant for the Timberwolves this year. I think that's a tremendous fit because that's certainly a young team that was shepherded by the coaching staff. And I'm going to throw this one out there, Sam Cassell. Guy that just won a championship with the Boston Celtics. He has been an assistant for a very long time. He has cut his teeth. He has paid his dues. And I think he would be a very, very interesting head coaching hire. I have no idea if he has any connections, but look, I don't know exactly what he did for the Boston Celtics. I do know that every team that he's been an assistant on, I think they've done really well. And I'm pretty sure he was the lead assistant on Boston this year, but someone can correct me if I was wrong.
Well, I've seen a lot of Pistons fans throwing out a possible candidate that I'm sure that we've talked about in the past. I know that we've done an episode on this guy, Chauncey Billups.
Yeah. No more former Pistons. Can we do that, please? No more coaching candidates that are only candidates in your mind because they wore a Pistons jersey, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you enjoyed watching them play. Being a player and being a coach are two different things. Now, players can become coaches, good coaches, and Sam Cassell, perfect example. Excellent all-star caliber point guard for decades. There's a possibility he could be a good head coach too. But look, Chauncey Billups, and this is not even like the team for him, right? Like Chauncey Billups does not. He's developing himself as a head coach. He doesn't need to be developing a bunch of raw, 19 to 23-year-olds that are still learning how to play themselves. His time in Portland has been a disaster. And to put it mildly, but look, I get it. No one's paying attention to what's going on in Portland. They just think of Chauncey Billups, the Hall of Fame Pistons point guard, and that's not what you're getting. You're not getting him because you think he can run the team. on the floor. He's supposed to be able to coach them, and this is not the right fit for him at all.
Yeah, I knew that you would say all of that, so I was expecting that response from you. Well, let's get to our next segment of today's show. The main thing we're going to talk about is we're going to do a draft preview. But before we do that, ESPN's Bobby Marks. Wait, got to make sure I get that name right. Yeah, Bobby Marks from ESPN put out an article today or yesterday rather, about some free agents that are going to be hitting the market and the best teams that would be good fits for them, as well as the deal that he thinks they should get. And there are 3 guys on this list that he is pointing towards the Pistons' direction. So we'll go ahead and start off with the first one here. And this guy has just been glued to the Pistons for the last 2 years, and I don't know why everyone's trying to force this, but Miles Bridges, the offer he thinks that Bridges could command is a 4-year, $105.5 million deal.
I thought you were going to say 6 to 18 months. Look, Miles Bridges, aside from being just a horrible PR move, he's a crappy human being. I don't know any of these players personally, so for me to say that, you really have to have done something to convince me. But aside from that, also a terrible fit, not a very good defender, hogs the ball a lot, which fine, this team could use from a ball dominant forward scoring wing standpoint, runs the floor well. This team was just a disaster defensively, and he would actually add to those problems. He scored a lot in Charlotte last season because they didn't really have anyone else to shoot the ball, and they were terrible defensively for having him on the floor. Personally, I would hate it, and from a team building standpoint, I would hate it. I'm sure he'd come cheaper because when you beat the mother of your kids, and I'm sorry he did that. That's not an alleged thing. That's something he did. You're going to come at a discount, and that's not a discount I'm very excited about. So we can move on from Miles. I will never be happy about Miles Bridges playing in the NBA, period, let alone him being on the Pistons. That would just drive me nuts.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely right there with you, and I mean that's the perfect response. Totally not happy with him even being in the league at all, regardless of where he's playing at. Definitely do not want him in a jersey of the team that I love and cheer for. So keep him out of here. I mean, I get it. Like when he was, before we knew the horrible person that he was, I could see the draw. But I mean, he's a bad guy and he does not belong here. The next person up on the list is Isaiah Hartenstein. They are recommending a 2-year, $50 million deal for him.
And that's fair, right? Because anything less, then he's just going to go back to the Knicks. The Knicks cannot afford to give him 2 years and $50 million, as I recall, because their payroll is already stretched out as it is. But yeah, Isaiah Hartenstein, offensively at least, he is everything that the Pistons wish they had last season. He's a brick wall screen setter, excellent with the little floaters in the lane. He's developing range, though he still doesn't quite have 3-point range yet. He's built like a truck. He finishes in the lane, decent foul shoot. He does, like, if Jalen Duren, and Duren's a much better athlete, but if he turned into the type of player Hartenstein is, I'd be thrilled. But he's far away from that. Look, it wouldn't shock me if they went after Hartenstein, but it wouldn't shock me if the price scared them off, because they still have a couple of young bigs on their team that they're developing. And we'll get into there's someone in the draft that's a very similar player to Hartenstein at the top of the draft that they could take at pick number 5 as well. So, look, I would be happy if he would make the Pistons better immediately on day one. But I'm just not sure if they need to spend $25 million a year on another center. They could, and they could justify it It just seems to like they could spend that money better elsewhere. There's so many holes on the roster. I think that it would be better spent, like say, at the wing position.
Yeah, I just think that there's so many cooks in the kitchen on that in terms of centers with the Pistons, and I don't know if having another guy here is really the answer. Especially, obviously Jalen Duren is not where we want him to be just yet, but he's approaching that. He's still a young player, still has some time to grow. Let's let him grow.
I will say this: he needs to grow off the bench. Jalen Duren, I have no problem with continuing to let him play, but his defense was he dragged the entire team down with his defense last year multiple times. And right now, I will say this: he needs to come off the bench behind someone that actually knows how to play center in the NBA, because he clearly doesn't, not from a defensive standpoint. So, like, if they signed Hartenstein to like a 1-year, $30 million deal, I'd be totally cool with it, because then he'd be able to, or even a 2-year deal. He'd be able to watch and learn, and then you'd still have Duren on the backside of that contract when it expired, and Duren is still extremely young. I do think that Duren needs to have someone that he needs to beat out for minutes, and it can't be James Wiseman.
All right. Well, here's another suggestion that he's laying out, and this guy we just saw play in the NBA Finals. It's Derek Jones Jr., and the offer is a 2-year, $44 million deal with a team option coming in the second year.
Okay, so this happens a lot when teams make these runs to the finals, that you get role players that, they get their come up to. Like, Derek Jones Jr. is the same guy that he's always been, which is a really athletic finisher. His athleticism, his length, I think, fools you into believing he's a better defender than he is. Even though he's an okay one, he's never going to be a guy that makes a huge difference for you. He'll do his job, I'll put it that way. He's still not a guy that you can rely on to space the floor for you, which on this team that's a big red flag. Again, like, if the Pistons brought him in for $10 million a year, I'd be okay with it. But like you said, and that might be what it would take to get him to come to leave a finals team to come to Detroit is $44 million over 2 years. And look, I'm never going to hate a 2-year deal because it's such a ridiculously short time in the NBA. It's not going to bother me all that much, but I don't know. If I had to choose between giving that money to Hartenstein or Derek Jones Jr., I would give it to Hartenstein because I think he's a superior player. I don't know. I like Derek Jones Jr. I really don't like that money. I don't know how many extra wins he gets the Pistons next season. I know Hartenstein would lead to a lot of wins. I don't think Derek Jones Jr. would. I guess that's my opinion on it.
No, that's understandable. I mean, you mentioned this happens all the time. Right? Matthew Dellavedova, wound up getting a big deal after JJ Barea is another guy that comes to mind. Dion Waiters, there's always these guys that kind of pop off in the finals, and I think it's just because they're getting more looks at them than they probably ever have.
And look. Derek Jones Jr., if you watch the Mavericks, he is wide open on every play because he's on the floor with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, and Lively's sucking in all the attention, diving to the basket. Like, Jones is the guy that defenses choose to leave open. He and PJ Washington were – I don't know if they saw a single contested shot the entire postseason, both of those guys. They were both left wide open. And there's a reason for that because they're both very unreliable shooters. Unless you're Oklahoma City, in which case they're Reggie Miller and Glenn Rice. But for the most part, like, the Mavericks were surviving on offense despite those guys, not because of them.
All right. Well, so that's that. Free agency is not for a bit now. So let's talk about what is very close to what we're at right now. a week from today. Next week the NBA draft will be going down, and there are multiple players that the Pistons could have some interest in and could be looking to draft. We are going to talk about each of those players today, and Keith's going to give his thoughts on each of them. So first, let's go with the players that there's basically no chance the Pistons are going to get. We'll start with Alex Sarr from Perth. He is mostly the consensus number 1 overall draft pick. Your thoughts on Sarr?
All right. So, I'm not trying to step on like Bryce Simon, friend of the show, for instance. He does this year round where he scouts prospects. I'm someone that dabbles in talent evaluation and scouting at the lower levels. I do not profess myself to be an expert, but I do enjoy it. I just wanted to get that out of the way. I'm going to be giving comparisons for every one of these players to a player that's no longer in the NBA because of retirement. These are A+, like dream scenario. I do not expect any of these players to turn out to be the players that I'm comparing them to. I'm just saying, in a dream scenario, this is what you could hope for. As far as Alexander Sarr, my notes on him, he's a tremendous shot blocker. He's a legit 7-footer, extremely, extremely mobile. I think that's the first thing that pops with him is how light on his feet he is for his size. Very much like Mobley in Cleveland, though I think his frame is bigger. I think he's got room for a little bit more bulk. A+ shot blocker. For his size, he's an excellent ball handler. He's never going to be a point forward, but the fact that he can handle the ball on the open floor at his size is another huge plus. Great coordination. Also a very solid finisher. I should qualify that because, like in most cases where he's finishing, guys are getting out of his way. Like, he's big, he's athletic. Anytime he goes up against a guy his size, there's some playing through contact issues there. But look, those are all extremely exciting things for a 7-foot guy that can play around the perimeter. And he's developing a shot, but the shot isn't quite there yet. Like, you can look at highlights of him making jumpers, for 10 minutes. But as a shooter, his percentages were not very good. Now, the downside with him, first and foremost, he's a terrible rebounder. It's a lot of people are drawing comparisons to Jaren Jackson Jr. because of that, where he's this big, athletic, mobile 7-footer, and he just has no feel for rebounding whatsoever. Floor game really isn't there yet. He can handle the ball, he can pass, but he's not a guy you're going to run your offense through. Certainly not in the NBA. He's not going to make a whole lot a living doing that, at least not in the first year. But really, those are my only gripes with his game. I think of all the players in the draft, I think he's the most likely to develop into a star or a star caliber player. I don't know if he will, because he's not a guarantee. Certainly not for most guys that are considered for number 1 in the draft. But I really like him as a prospect. I think any team would like to have him. His character stuff, I have no idea. Because I know he's refusing to work out for Atlanta for some reason, which is kind of weird to me because since they have the number 1 pick. But maybe he's thinking that they're going to trade him. I don't know, or trade the pick. I really don't know what the deal is with that. But yeah, that's my take on Alex Sarr.
Yeah, it's we should mention, and I don't think I'm saying anything that people don't know about already, but the word on this draft, the rap on this draft is that it's not a very it's not that great of a draft. Basically,
it lacks stars.
It lacks stars. It doesn't have the talent that the last year's draft had with obviously Wemby and some of the other guys, and then the year before with Ben Caro and some other players. Just have some tempered optimism with whoever the Pistons draft, because they're probably not going to be ready to go right away.
I want to add this. This draft has a lot of players that I really like, There are just no players in this draft that I look at and say that guy's definitely a future all-star. I think there are certainly a lot of players in this draft that could conceivably come in and play good rotation minutes next season. I just don't see any guys that we're talking about them in the all-star game in 2 or 3 years. When people criticize this draft class, I think we should make that clear that I think every prospect that we're about to talk about, and we're going to talk about 9 or 10 of them, I would like all of them to a degree on the Pistons for whatever role. It's just I don't see any of them, surpassing Cade Cunningham for being the franchise player.
Right.
So,
the other guy that probably has no chance of being drafted here is Zachary Restream, a name that I just learned how to pronounce about an hour ago, thanks to Keith. He is coming out of France, and he's mostly been considered to be the number 2 pick in the draft.
Okay, as we close off the Alex Sarr discussion, I wanted to say my comparison to him, and again, this is a dream scenario, but Larry Nance Sr. Larry Nance Sr., a guy who was also damn near 7 feet tall, also very mobile, also extremely athletic, also a very gifted shot blocker. Didn't quite have the 3-point range, though he did have a mid-range game. But look, Alex Sarr doesn't have 3-point range right now either. He only makes them because he takes enough of them, but his percentages are terrible. Moving on to Zachary Restream, I think it's weird because I think he's the most raw player that we're going to talk about, but I also think he is probably the best bet to reach whatever his potential is. This guy's a lump of clay. He's still a teenager, already very productive in Europe. He is 3-and-D written all over him. I think is what you take away when you see him. He's not a guy that's going to create his own shot at the NBA level, at least not with anything that he's shown in Europe. He's not a guy that's going to take other players off the dribble and make plays. What he is a very long 6'9" wing, 6'8", 6'9" wing. He's good at shooting, very accurate shooter. Contested shots, you still don't know about it because so many of his shots are uncontested. But look, yeah, I mean, he has a very pretty shot. He can come off screens. That's really what stands out about his offensive game. It is just a very pretty, fluid shot from a 6'9" kid, which you don't really see all that often. Defensively is something else that I think he excels at. Certainly is an on-ball defender. Off-ball, I think he still makes a little too many mistakes. Like he's a guy that's kind of there as an excellent shooter, and he's kind of there as a defender, but he's not really there at either place yet. But he's so young that you can easily see him getting there. What I have, things that I like about him, the catch and shoot. He's also a very good cutter off the ball. Like you can tell he enjoys playing off the ball. Problem is so many wings in today's NBA, especially the really good ones, they all play on the ball to some degree. They can play make, and that's not really his game, which depending on what you're looking for, that might turn you off to him as a prospect. He has a nice little step back, but it's like a 1 or 2 dribble step back. It's not a guy. He's not going to size you up and cross you over and step. He's not that type of guy. He doesn't have that handle. He's not terribly athletic, which I think is, look, at his size, he doesn't really need to be. But finishing in the lane, I think, is going to be a problem with him in the NBA. It's not so much in Europe, especially finishing in transition. I don't think he plays to contact very well. And yeah, the passing isn't great, but again, he's a teenager. He's going to improve on that. Yeah, you're not drafting him to be a playmaker anyway. You're drafting him to be a very valuable 3-and-D guy. Like Jaden McDaniels makes $100 million, and he's not a playmaker at all. He's a guy that defends and shoots threes. My dream comparison for Zachary Restream is a guy with Michigan ties, Detroit ties, Shane Battier. A guy that went to my rival high school while I was in high school. We overlapped each other by a year. Shane Battier, very tall wing, one of the, I don't want to say original, but one of the first guys that made an entire living in the NBA being a 3-and-D small forward. Never had the chops to make plays, never really had to. He was a guy that every NBA team valued tremendously, simply because he spaced the floor for you and he would take all the toughest front court defensive assignments. And Ricochet, he needs to put on a lot of bulk, I think, to get there, but that's kind of who he reminds me of. But look, I think he could develop into a lot of different players. He's still very young. He has a lot of tools to work with.
I'll tell you, I mean, I love the 3-and-D ability because I think the Pistons, what they need is shooting and someone who could score.
I love him for the Pistons, but I don't think there's any chance he's available at 5.
No, yeah, that's the sad thing is that like you said, he's probably gone. Most consensus boards have him at 2.
Yeah.
But let's get to some guys that could be available for the Pistons, and we'll start off with the man that James Edwards, a friend of the show and athletic Pistons beat writer, selected for the Pistons, and that's Colorado's Cody Williams.
Yeah, Cody Williams, who's a very polarizing guy simply because a lot of people don't really like him from a production standpoint. And look, generally, when you're the 3rd best player on the University of Colorado, you're not usually a lottery pick. Cody Williams, one-and-done kid. He was hurt a lot last season. The things that I like about him, just like Ricochet, great size for a wing, 6'8". He is a good shooter he's not just a guy that has hot spots, in the corner or at the elbow of the 3-point line. He's comfortable seemingly shooting from anywhere on the court. Anywhere 3-point line and in. Mid-range is not going to be an issue with him. He's perfectly fine doing that. I think he has a pretty good handle. I hesitate to say very good handle because it's a lot of straight line drive stuff. But look, I think for a 6'8" guy, he looks like an NBA wing, the way he can handle the ball. Defense, especially his on-ball defense, pretty good. That was probably the strongest point of his game that I saw last season was defensively. I think he stayed pretty locked in most of the time, which is great because he disappeared on offense a lot. So he spent that energy playing defense. And the thing that people, I think, talk the most about, excellent finisher, one of the best statistically from an efficiency standpoint, one of the best finishers in all of college basketball last season. When he got to the rim, he usually scored. Very athletic. He can finish over the top of a defense. He can slither around a defense. He has a lot of ways to score. The one thing I don't like is that I don't think he played to contact enough, which in the NBA, you're not going to be able to just out athleticism people. You're going to need to draw fouls. And I don't think he did that at a rate that I was comfortable with last season. Things that I don't like, robotic, very robotic as a shot creator. It's almost a set shot with him when he pulls up, and his form is not something that you're going to, if someone's up on him, he's not going to get his shot off very easily. It's going to get blocked. And I say that both as a mid-range shooter and as a 3-point shooter. I don't like his form at all, even though he shot great percentages all over the court. He didn't take a lot of shots. And I think that part of that is because he doesn't have a very quick release, and it's easy to close out on him. I think he got a lot of good finishes that way, but as a shooter, his percentages lie like no other player in this draft. Because you look at a guy that shot damn near 40% from 3, and you think, wow, he's a sniper. No, pretty much most of his shots were wide open, and he only took about 1 a game, or not even 1 a game at Colorado. It's just not a sample size that you look at and say this will translate to the NBA. Part of that is this was my one note on him. I don't know if he lacks confidence or if it's just he's not able to get his shot off, but like he would just vanish in college basketball games for such a long period of time. as I said, he was the third best player in his own college team. I don't know if that he didn't have the mentality or if he just physically couldn't do the things that allow college basketball players to take over a game. I can't tell at this point. I didn't see enough of him to make that determination. Also, and this is the thing I like least about him, his decision-making sucks. He finished Colorado with 10 more turnovers than assists, which is why when people bring him up as a potential point forward, I want to put my fist through a wall. He doesn't have the pass. Like it's not that he's not a willing passer. It's just he's a bad passer. Most of his assists that I saw, they were just to guys that were wide open, and that's fine. But he's not a guy that's going to dissect an NBA defense off the dribble and make correct reads all the time. In fact, I think he'll struggle doing that in the NBA, at least until he develops further. Also, he's a bit skinny. Like for a 6'8" guy, he's not even 200 pounds. That is, and look, that's something you can work on. I'm just saying, his frame to me suggests that, you know, he could have some injury problems at least early on until he starts gaining strength. My comparison for Cody Williams, and this is not an exciting one, but it's Trevor Ariza. This is another guy, 3-and-D guy, really athletic. Not a guy that ever was asked to make plays, but a guy that also started on a championship team and was relied on in that role heavily on the 2009 Lakers. Trevor Ariza made a lot of money in the NBA simply because he was a reliable guy that defended a big wing. He would knock down open shots. Also had a very robotic release. Not a guy that could create his own three, but to me, and look, that's not going to excite anybody, but Cody Williams as a prospect just doesn't really excite me. I think he has a low ceiling. Now, his floor, I think, is higher than I think it's higher than people think because he is already a pretty good defender. He's shown that he's not a guy that you can just leave open, and he is a tremendous finisher at the rim. But all of those things don't add up to a guy that's a real off-the-ball impact creator. So he's almost like Restream light to me. I think Restream has more upside, but I think Cody Williams is a better player maybe right now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. And watching his shot, you know, you could really see that it does take him a minute to load it up. And it is kind of a slower moving, shot. So, but we already talked about Fred Vinson being here. You know, maybe that's something that they could work on together, kind of load that thing up faster and recreate his mechanics. I mean, I know that's not the easiest thing to do in the world, but you do have somebody here that's pretty widely regarded for being a good shooting coach. So I don't know, maybe you can fashion something out of that.
Yeah, and I know that's why he's getting linked to the Pistons recently, is because he is the type of wing that the Pelicans have drafted, like, you know, the Herb Jones, who also has a shot that you can time with a calendar. Trey Murphy, like the Pelicans are known for drafting, you know, long wings with potential and then developing them into something really valuable. So I can see that logic. I don't know if I'd love him at 5 though. I would have to see who's left on the board, but it's hard for me to imagine a scenario where the Pistons are picking at 5 and I'm saying, wow, I hope they pick Cody Williams here. Like in a trade down, I'd be thrilled. Like 8 or 9, I'd love it, but not at 5.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens with that one. The next player up, we're going to go down south here to Peyton Manning's school, Tennessee, to look at Dalton Knecht.
Dalton Knecht. As soon as the lottery ended, this was the guy I first predicted. Like that night, when it was discovered that the Pistons were picking 5th, like this is the first guy that came to mind. And look, Dalton Knecht. My first note on him: scorer, and I get the letters got bigger every time I wrote the word. Just he's so exciting as a scorer. He is the very definition of a 3-tier scorer. Not like the last two prospects we looked at. No, Dalton Connect is the entire package. And when it comes to putting the ball in the basket, he can score off the ball. He can score on the ball. 22 points a game at Tennessee, not exactly easy, and shot 40% from three. The thing I love most about him, and I underline this, finishes going left a lot. If you just looked at him finishing, just plays of him finishing around the rim, you'd swear he was left-handed. I've seen plays where he's driven right and still gone with the left. And that is the greatest, to me, that's the sneakiest trait that an NBA player can have, is the ability to finish with your offhand. He's great at it. He has more bounce than you would think. Not a great handle, but a good handle. And certainly with his ability to stretch the floor, you have to play up on him. And that allows him driving lanes that most players aren't afforded. And he's a big wing too. He's 6'6", over 200 pounds. Like, he can play through contact. He's not just a shooter. He is a scorer. He is not just an on-ball scorer either. You can play him off the ball. From an offensive standpoint, I love everything about his game. Just as a pure, like, he's a 90s two guard. Like, in every like that term, that 90s two, like, he's the quintessential 90s two guard. What I don't like about him, obviously, everyone's going to mention his age. He's fifth-year senior, 23 years old, which, fine, maybe he doesn't have a whole lot more to grow, but 23 is not old by NBA standards. His lateral speed, for whatever reason, north-south, he's quick. East-west, which that plays into your perimeter defense, not very quick at all. He did get picked on a lot in college. It'll get worse in the NBA. That's something that he's going to need to work on. Fortunately, he has a big frame, so you're not going to bully him physically, but he's going to have to worry. He's going to have to work out his defensive, I would say, feel for the game. He gets stuck on screens a lot, so he's also, not only is he going to struggle on the ball, he's probably going to struggle a little bit off the ball because he doesn't fight through screens as much as you would like. Again, he's a big body, so that you expect that. Also kind of a mediocre passer. Kind of reminded me of Jaden Ivey, where he would make the right read once he drew a lot of attention, but the pass would be off the mark, right? And that's something I guess he can work on, but that for 23 years old, you expect someone to be a more accurate passer, especially to wide open players, than he is. My comparison, and you're going to love this, it's another Tennessee guy, Allen Houston. Just his frame, very similar. His ability to get his shot off, very similar. The fact he's just such a comfortable three-tier scorer anywhere on the court. He's just, when he shoots the ball, you're surprised when it misses. Could be from three-point range, could be from the paint, could be from mid-range. However you want it, he will give you buckets. It's just the question is, can he stay on the floor long enough to make an impact in the NBA because of his defense? Like that's the big question mark with him.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, I think, this is the guy I want the most at this point.
Yeah.
After you brought him up a couple weeks ago, I kind of got into and obviously I am not a scout at all. I'm more of a, hey, I like this guy can shoot. But I really appreciate that he can shoot. Like, he could shoot, and he could drive to the hole. He could dunk on you. He can maneuver around you and put up a fancy layup. And I want someone who could put some points on the board. So if he's there at 5, which he should be, if I were Trajan, I would maybe sprint to the podium to draft this guy.
My one, and I would qualify by saying this: Dalton Connect is the least New Orleans Pelicans type of draft prospect, simply because he isn't a very good defender, and his upside defensively is certainly pretty low. Usually the Pelicans go for the athletic defender first, and they work out the shot later. That doesn't mean that Langdon isn't going to have a different philosophy in Detroit. I'm just saying I would be less surprised if they drafted Cody Williams over Dalton Connect.
That's fair. we shall see. Well, let's move on to our next player here, and we're heading over to the G League for Ron Holland.
Okay, so Ron Holland, and this is another guy where you either love him or he might be the most polarizing guy. Like, there's so many different opinions on Ron Holland because he wasn't great in the G League, but he was still productive. Everyone points out in the G League they didn't really have a point guard at all, so their offense was just a mess, and he was stuck creating everything for himself. But all the same, his shot sucks. You look at his form, and his form looks just fine, but he's just not very good at any level. Even as a free throw shooter, he's mediocre. Now, what he does do, he's very athletic, 6'8", 6'9" wing, again, great size, can finish over the top of the defense, has enough wiggle where he can finish around shot blockers. Great defense on and off the ball, and I think that's the most important thing. Among all of the forwards that we've gone over, I think he's the best defensive player right now. Very good shot blocker. Great in passing lanes. That was one I like. It sticks out to me. His anticipation in passing lanes is excellent. Though I think he takes a few risks, but that's part of the game when you go for steals. I think it does more good than harm with him. The problems with him, again, we've been over this, 24% 3-point shooter. I don't care how good your shot looks. If it doesn't go in, I just don't care at all. He needs to improve tremendously as a shooter. Terrible mid-range game. I don't even know if his mid-range game exists. There's just not much of it with him. Not a very good passer. Again, not a selfish player, I don't think. It's just and again, he played in a crowd last year, so he didn't really have any great passing angles, but he didn't show a whole lot as a playmaker either. Another guy with more turnovers than assists, and that just tacks on to what I just said. My compare, and this is weird because I just spent the last minute tearing his game up, but I think he is such a great athlete, and I think his motor defensively is so good that if he could just develop the shot, I think he has a tremendous amount of upside. Though I don't know if he has a great chance of reaching it. My comparison for him is Eddie Jones. Again, for those of you joining late, these comparisons are dream scenario comparisons. I'm not saying he is Eddie Jones or anything, or he's going to have the same career as Eddie Jones. What I'm saying is if everything goes perfectly for Ron Holland, I could see a lot of Eddie Jones in him because of the defense, because of his ability to attack the rim, the way he glides down the floor, the vertical pop, just everything about him in the open floor reminds me of Eddie Jones on offense and on defense. It's just can you get his shot to work? And this is just like Cody Williams. This is a guy I've seen linked to the Pistons a little bit. I know there's a report out there saying Trajan is not sold on him. I'd like to know what Trajan sees that I don't, because the upside, he certainly seems like the type of guy that the Pelicans would pick.
I got to tell you, man, Eddie Jones, I would love an Eddie Jones type player in Detroit. Was amazing with the Lakers before Shaq showed up, kind of just took over. But yeah, no, I mean, Ron Holland, I think, was probably the earliest guy who was mocked to the Pistons, like when mock drafts first started about mid-season. I don't know. I mean, I don't really see anything in him that would make me super excited, that would make me rush to the podium. That's what I want. I want the 5th pick is up. Like, I feel like I can't live without this guy, and I don't feel that about Ron Holland.
I don't know if you're going to feel that about any of these guys. I know you said you're very excited about Connect, but the first time Connect gets played off the floor in Summer League, I would just, again, temper your expectations. Like, some of these guys might surprise you, whoever they pick at 5, if they do pick at 5.
All right. The next guy up is out of UConn. We're talking about Donovan Clingan, a center. Do the Pistons need another center?
Yes, we've just been over this. We just discussed them paying $50 million to a center from New York that's not even a star because they need a center that plays like a center. Donovan Clingan, enormous human being. You wouldn't if all you saw was the national championship game, you wouldn't think that because he was up against Zach Edey. But Donovan Clingan checks in at 7'2", 280. He is a mountain of a human being, and as 280-pound human beings go, he has excellent feet. There's the 1 3-point shot he hit last season. Things I have with him, he is a classic true center, but he's also very, very good at those classic true things. And you know what? Those things, if you look at the difference that Lively made for the Mavericks this year, those are still valuable traits. A+ shot blocker. He is a shot blocker. He's not just a rim protector. He will block shots on ball. I've seen him block jumpers from guys that just thought that they could shoot over him. And like he has insane arms. I think his wingspan, I think, is longer than Zach Edey's. 7'7" arms, and I think that's almost a lie. Just he doesn't need to jump very far to dunk the ball. And most guys his size, they would get played off the floor defensively. Clingan has much, much better feet than that. He's never going to match up against a point guard in the middle of the – he's not that type of guy. He's going to be playing and drop in most cases. But there's times where if you need him to switch and cover for 5 seconds, he'll be able to do that. His mobility at his size is, I think, very, very deceivingly good. For a guy that's 280 pounds. A+ screener, and that's something the Pistons have needed forever, is a guy that sets bone-crushing screens. Clingan can do that. He's not only a great screener, he's very good at DHO, and that leads me into the other thing I like about him is his passing. High post, low post, and it's almost like a quarterback where he's so tall and his arms are so long that he can see over the top of the defense. And he makes very, very accurate reads. His last season in UConn, I think he had 53 assists to 28 turnovers. Like his assist to turnover ratio for a center was almost 2-1. That is insane for a guy that's a traditional low post center. That he got called for very few bad screens. He got called for very few offensive fouls, and he threw very few bad passes. Like his assist total isn't going to blow you away, but he was extremely efficient. As a post scorer, again, 7'2", insanely long arms. If he gets the ball in the post, it's kind of like watching Boban, where he's just going to score over the top of the guy, and there's nothing the defense can do about it. And that's really the things that I love about him. The things that kind of worry you is, one, his stamina. Even as on UConn last season, he barely played more than half a game, averaged 22 minutes. A lot of that is because, a lot of UConn's games were over by halftime. But that still doesn't excuse the fact that you haven't seen him play in big minutes. You don't know how his stamina is, which in the NBA, with a lot more running that they do, that's kind of worrisome. His free throw percentage, he's a bad free throw shooter. No way to sugarcoat that. 58%. It's not Drummond bad, but it's bad, and it's going to need to improve, especially if you're going to use him as a post player, because he'll get fouled a lot. The perimeter shot. And I know, and this is the final thing, I know that they floated out some workout tape of him hitting threes. Words cannot describe how little I care about that. All right. He did not shoot the ball at UConn from the perimeter. So either he had no confidence in his shot or his shot wasn't good enough. And look, we've already seen Isaiah Stewart take the very, very long path from a non-shooter college big man to a shooting NBA big man. It is not quick. It takes a long time. There's people thinking he could be the next Brook Lopez. Fine. Brook Lopez took like 7 years to shoot threes. Maybe that's in Clingan's future, but do not expect that right off the bat. I will not count that as something that he can do right now. My comparison and people aren't going to love this because I just talked.
Christian Laettner.
Christian Laettner wasn't 280-pound center. No, it's actually Andrew Bogut, a guy that was the number 1 pick in his own draft. Andrew Bogut, spectacularly intelligent defender, very big guy, just a brick wall screen setter. He was originally the defensive guy on the Warriors while Draymond Green was coming along. The only reason that he wasn't a better offensive player than he was is because he had a serious wrist injury about midway through his career that dropped him from a double-digit scorer to a guy that was just out there for defense. But look, a healthy Andrew Bogut, and he's just a little taller than Andrew Bogut, but I think that there's a lot of Bogut in his game. And look, Bogut was a tremendous, tremendous defensive player from the center position. So I would not be unhappy at all. I really want the Pistons to pick him if he's available. And if he turns out to be Andrew Bogut, I'd be thrilled because he's exactly the type of player that they need on this team right now.
This guy seems like a guy that would have been an incredible draft pick in 1996. I don't know. I would like a center to be able to step back and shoot the ball these days. You know, I think that's just the way the NBA is moving. And you mentioned that yes, those classic center things they certainly work, but yeah, I would just prefer that they focused on the development of Jalen Duren rather than trying to just already replace him.
I think he's better than Jalen Duren. Like right now, I think if they played tomorrow, I think he'd be a better player than. It's not just to the things that he does. It's just he understands how to play the game. Like he could start an NBA game tomorrow, and he's only sophomore college player. He's still young, but he could play an NBA game tomorrow, give you 15 to 18 minutes, and make a serious impact on winning. Like Jalen Duren can pile as many 20 and 12 games as. And look, he'll do it on good efficiency too. But he'll turn the ball over too much. He will lose his man on defense repeatedly. I don't know. I'm not closing the door on Jalen Duren, but I would really love Kling in here. And look, you do need 2 really good centers in the NBA anyway. Most teams do have 2 good centers. But I get it. I get what you're saying. I would love a stretch 5 too, but there just isn't one in this draft that I think has a lot of promise. And there's not one in free agency either.
That's fair. Let's go ahead and move to our next guy. We're staying in the college ranks. By the way, watching all these college highlights has made me, it's made me miss the days when there were college basketball video games. I know we're getting college football 25. Please, 2K or EA or whoever wants to do it, let's get the college basketball video game back as well.
Has there ever been a good one?
I thought they were pretty good back in the day. I used
to
play
they all seemed like Kmart versions of NBA Live to me. I don't know. I never had a college basketball game that I liked.
I thought it was fun to be able to play in, March Madness and all that. And I don't know. I liked them. All right, we've got 2 players left. Our next guy is Rob Dillingham out of Kentucky. They say he's a point guard, but Keith, you were saying that he's probably not.
So Reed Shepherd is the guy that a lot of Pistons fans are looking at because he is the best shooter in the draft. And although he is kind of undersized, he is more of a classic 2 guard. Rob Dillingham, first comment, he is the most electric playmaker in the draft. If he were 5 or 6 inches taller, he'd be the first pick, and no one would debate it. You could watch highlights of this guy forever because he is just so electric with the ball in his hands. He's extremely quick. He's got a great step back, which, look, you can say Marcus Sasser has a great step back, and he does. But what differentiates Dillingham is that he has the ability to take the ball to the hole. He has the floater game, which Sasser doesn't have. He has the ability to get through big men and get to the rim and score, which Sasser doesn't have. Lightning quick release, just absolutely. And look, he has to at his size. He's 6'1", but takes very good care of the ball, 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio for a guy that's not really a point guard. Really quick release. If you're not already on him when he shoots the ball, he's getting the shot off. It doesn't matter how much taller you are. You're not going to react fast enough. Very, very athletic finisher, even though he's not a guy that we'll get to the Reed Sheppard thing in a second. We'll go over him next. He's a good passer, and this is kind of the opposite of some of the other criticisms that I've had. He's actually a pretty good passer, but I think he has poor vision, which hurts, I think, his potential as a point guard, is he doesn't see reads that he needs to. But when he does make passes, they're usually pretty good passes. He doesn't turn the ball over a lot. The one thing with him is he's so herky-jerky, he gets out of control a little bit. Sometimes he gets caught in the air, like the classic Rodney Stuckey, where occasionally a guy will guess right and contest him, and he's already up in the air and doesn't really know what to do with it. But, yeah, as far as just a guy that's a flat-out scorer, 44% three-point shooter on top of everything else, super deep range. Like, you can give him the ball, and he will produce offense for you, whether it's scoring for himself or – drawing multiple defenders and hitting the open man. He is the most fun player on offense to me to watch. I just don't think he's a very high draft pick because, and this is the thing that is, I think, going to cost him in the draft, is he's 6'1", 164 pounds, soaking wet. He is like Allen Iverson's size. He's taller than Iverson, but he's every bit like the skinny kid that Iverson was. And Iverson was he would almost have to be as good as Allen Iverson as an offensive player to get serious NBA minutes. At that size, you have to be, because even at his size, he's a terrible defender. Like he just does nothing on defense to help you, and you're going to have to cover for him a lot. Like his defense worries me more than Dalton Connect's does, because at least Connect is a big guy. So my comparison for him is a guy that you would remember, but maybe some of our younger people don't. Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf.
Yeah.
Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, great scorer, great super accurate shooter, could create his own shot. But he was roughly Dillingham's size, and because of that, he got miscast as a point guard a lot, and he was a scorer. He wasn't really a point guard, and that kind of hurt his potential in the NBA to be anything more than a like an off the bench, like third guard scorer type. But yeah, I was just looking at these highlights. Dillingham's footwork is just outstanding. It looks like he's moving at a different speed than everybody else. I don't know. He's fun to watch. I don't expect the Pistons to pick him at 5. I would actually be kind of disappointed if they did. But I don't know. He'll get picked by somebody, I think, in the top 10, and hopefully it'll work out, because I think the NBA would be better for having Rob Dillingham being an impact player, because I think he's a guy that people pay to see.
I definitely see that Mahmoud comparison, and it's funny that they're actually playing on the LSU court right now as we talk about that. But yeah, I mean, he's running all over the place. Like, this guy is so fast, and what a fluid shot too. I mean, his release is great. I am a little concerned that he keeps putting his leg out, though, on these shots. I mean, that's not really that big of a deal, but I know that that's kind of a thing that refs are watching for. Hey, it's Michelle Monaghan. For some reason, there's a commercial now. Anyways.
All right. So,
I like the idea of it. I just don't think that they're going to go that route.
Yeah. Like, they need wings. They need defenders. They don't. And again, Marcus Sasser is not Rob Dillingham from an offensive standpoint. They have a guy already that can create his own shot. Albeit he's probably a poor manager, but he's also a much better defensive player than Rob Dillingham.
Right.
All right, so let's move on to Reed Sheppard real quick.
Okay.
Because we do have a question on Reed Sheppard. I don't think Reed Sheppard is too small for the NBA. I think he's 6'2". He's certainly stronger than Rob Dillingham. Like, he's not that much taller than Rob Dillingham, but he's certainly thicker than Rob Dillingham. I think his defensive instincts are 100% better. excellent in passing lanes, really, really good in passing lanes as an off-ball guy. He blocked a lot of shots for a guy that's a little 6'2" guard. Excellent athleticism. All right, but let's get into the only reason that he's in consideration in the top 10, and that's because he is the best shooter in the draft. My notes for his shot, his shooting is I just wrote down holy shit. That's my only notes. He's just incredible. You would have a hard time shooting 52% from three in an empty gym. He shot 52% from three in Division I college basketball. He does not miss. I guess technically he misses 48% of the time, but it doesn't feel like he does. He is just as pure a shooter. Like his shot reminds me, nothing else, mind you, but his shot reminds me a lot of Steve Nash. Just the fluid way, and he shoots it so quickly. Like there's so little wasted movement on his shot. It's just there's so much to love about his shot. Just the way he can shoot it off the catch, shoot it off the dribble. There's a little bit of a floater game that he has, but it's not only that, it's the fact that he can attack closeouts. Like you have to pick him up so early that it creates driving lanes that aren't available to normal NBA players. And even though he's not the quickest, he can take advantage of that. And not only is he the best shooter in the draft, he might be one of the 3 or 4 best passers in the draft. He's not a point guard. I don't think he doesn't have the handle for it. But his ability as a secondary creator to take advantage of closeouts, come off of screens, get into the lane, and as soon as defenders collapse, he makes accurate reads all the time. I think he would pair the best with Cade Cunningham of any player that we're going to go over. I think the chemistry would be tremendous because they're both intelligent players. They're both great shooters. Well, Cade's developing as a shooter, but you get my point. I think he could play off of Cade extremely well. Very good around screens, attacks closeouts. Now, the issue with him, his size. He is short for a 2 guard in the NBA. There's no doubt about that. I don't know what they're going to list him as. He's 6'2", put shoes on him, and he's 6'3". He's probably 190 to 200 pounds. Like he'll get bigger. Like he's got a good frame. And again, he racked up steals and blocks last year. It's not like this was a guy that people were getting picked on. His lateral quickness isn't the best, so he does give up stuff in the open floor when he's guarding the ball occasionally. But I don't think it's egregious. Like Rob Dillingham got murdered on defense last year. Reed Sheppard did not. I thought more often than not he held his own. My comparison for Reed Sheppard is a guy named Jeff Hornacek. Jeff Hornacek, roughly the same size. Hornacek might have been an inch taller, but Hornacek himself was a guy that made a living in the NBA simply because he was a pure shooter. He could shoot from a variety of angles, great release, could come off of screens. Again, that's not to say he'll be Jeff Hornacek, but Hornacek was an all-star at one point. He was a guy giving 20-plus points in the NBA at one point before, his knee injuries kind of slowed him down. But just like I could watch Reed Sheppard shoot all day. Like that shot is just so beautiful. And I know he's a lot of favorite. He's a favorite to a lot of Pistons analysts that we know, but I don't know if they're going to pick him because, again, this is not the type of guy that the Pelicans would draft typically because they go defense first and they develop your shot later. But I would like it just, one time. I would like them to look, and I don't even know if Shepherd's going to be there at 5. But if he is, I would be very happy if the Pistons took him because I think this would be the first draft pick that they would have made that I would have said, man, this is a Cade Cunningham draft pick. This is a guy you drafted because you think his skill set fits your franchise player. That would make me happy.
Wow. That's some high praise there for Reed Sheppard. It would certainly be interesting. A backcourt of Reed Sheppard and Cade Cunningham, 2 guys who can shoot the ball. I guess I'm a little. I don't know. I mean, can he? I was going to see if I was getting my question answered there. Can he drive? Can he take the ball to the? Well, here he is doing it right there. All right. Well then, okay,
No.
yeah.
Okay,
I'm interested.
He did have the highest vertical leap at the combine, even though everyone kind of agrees that he gamed the combine a little bit by short arming his wingspan. So it looked like he had a more explosive vertical than he really does. But look, the proof is in the fact that he did block a lot of shots for a guy that was his size. He can certainly get up there and jump. Is he going to make a living finishing in the NBA? No. But look, you have Asar Thompson for that. You have Jalen Duren for that. You have a lot of guys on your team already. Cade Cunningham. You have a lot of big mobile people on your team that want to get to the rim. This is just a selfish. This guy is going to open the floor for everybody else, in my opinion.
All right. Well, with that, we have just one more player, and look, we've talked about this guy already, but he's in 95% of Pistons mock drafts. I mean, he's clearly the one that everyone thinks the Pistons are going to take, and that's
because he's represented by Arntellem's son.
Yes,
it's the only reason
yes.
people. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's the 90% of the reason.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a fair thing to say. Matas Buzelis.
Yep. So Matas, Lithuanian, which if you know anything about Lithuania, their number one export is basketball players. He's I think both his parents played professionally, played basketball professionally. He comes from that type of a family. Things I like about him, and I'll try to be more kind this time. He has great height, not great wingspan, but I mean, look, he is 6'10", a legit 6'10". I think he has outstanding footwork in the paint when he's creating his own shot. I think that's the one thing that stands out about him versus the rest of the players in this draft is he can really create his shot in traffic. Maybe that's credit to the G League for giving him a team with absolutely no floor spacers that he constantly had to shoot over multiple defenders on every possession. But I mean, he has that going for him. He has a nice little spin move, nice little step back. Just like Dalton Connect, this is the only other prospect that I saw in the draft that I was super excited about the fact that he has a very strong left hand. Finishes very well with his left hand. As with his right, I think he's dangerous going to the basket with both of those. And that's good because it makes him unpredictable. And the thing that I think is his strongest asset right now is his rim protection. Now, the problem is he's not a center. He's not going to play center. He's a 4 in the NBA. I think he's the least versatile guy that we've spoken about because he's a stretch 4. He's going to play the 4. I don't think he's going to play the 3 or the 5. It's not going to. It's just that one thing. But anyway, as a shot blocker, he has great instincts, both as a help side shot blocker. And look, considering he doesn't have very long arms, I think that's all anticipation. That's all IQ with him. Now back to the things that I don't like about him. I think he has poor lateral quickness. I think in space he's going to get exposed in the NBA. He has a weak frame, which I think is going to hurt. The fact that he has great footwork, but you're going to be able to bump him off his spot, and he's going to lose balance a lot in the NBA. Like Franz Wagner was able to overcome that because he had such a high skill level. I don't see that with Matas. His shot is just abysmal, 26% 3-point shooter. And I think he actually shot worse when he was wide open, uncontested. It was just people keep bringing up that he shot really well in high school. 1, the high school line's shorter, and 2, it's high school. I don't care. That does not translate to the NBA in any way, shape, or form. And his motor isn't. It's weird. It's not that I think he's lazy. He's disengaged, I think, a little bit too much for my liking for a guy you're excited about picking at pick 5. I think he disappears a little bit too much. But look, he does have the physical traits. He does have a very refined scoring acumen. My comparison for him, and this is a dream scenario, but it's Andrei Kirilenko. It's a guy that gives you a little bit of everything, a guy that's an A-plus shot blocker, a guy that's never going to be a high-level offensive creator, but if he can get the shot figured out, he's a guy that will make everyone else on the court better because you'll have to compensate for him defensively because he'll be able to stretch the floor, and he'll be able to attack closeouts because that's the one thing he does have a good first step. Side to side, he's not very quick. North south, he is very quick, and he is moderately athletic. He'll finish around the rim if he has an open lane. So again, this is a dream scenario comparison, but Andrei Kirilenko would be the guy I'd compare the best of his traits to.
Well, yeah, it's the first time I've heard you say good things about Matas. I guess we'll see if that's the way that things are going to go. But I definitely think that you are onto something with the idea that he's represented by Arntellen's son being the reason that everyone is sort of just booking him to be here. So
yeah.
But that is going to wrap up our draft preview. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in. We had kind of a long show today, but we wanted to make sure we got all these guys talked about for you. And obviously, Monty Brown thing came up and added to the length of the show. But we will be back next week. I would like to go live during the draft. We'll see if we could talk Keith into it. And then we'll go from there. But we will see you guys next Wednesday, no matter what we do.